Hey, everybody, this is Munson Steed, and welcome to Health IQ. I am so proud. I found this sister with superpowers, and she truly is using them, flexing them for many of you to be able to save our lives and be here during and hopefully after this pandemic, which is lasted so long. But the sister with superpowers I'm talking about is Dr. Brown. How are you, Dr. Brown?
I'm doing great. How are you?
It's a beautiful day because I am next to a sister with superpowers who's taken the time to really become a trusted member of those Black doctors and physicians and Black scientists that are truly thinking about the health equity and the issues that we face as a community. So, stepping right into it, where were you when you decided at Xavier that medical school was in your life? Describe that moment.
I actually decided very early in life, I was probably around middle school when I decided that I knew I wanted to be a doctor and a pediatrician specifically. And my father sat next to a Xavier alum on a flight when I was in high school, probably a freshman. And I was already looking at the top medical schools in the country and not at colleges yet. And he got me on their mailing list, and they recruited me. And it was an easy choice for me. I always wanted to go to an HBCU. And at the time, they were number one in placing African Americans into medical school. And so I got a phenomenal education there, and went on to the medical school of my choice.
Well, that's phenomenal. Your choice. We'll get back to that. But let's lean into this. One of the themes for us at Rolling Out is because we met. And so I'd like to know if you can describe at least one and hopefully two professors at Xavier that helped because you met them prepare you for what you met when you moved and matriculated to medical school at Harvard.
I would definitely say that Xavier is, a family-oriented, school. And we had countless, deans, administrators, teachers who really brought you in and made sure that you were going to be successful, right? And really holding you to a high expectation, which I think is really important. And definitely one of the persons who was really impactful for me was Dean Alcorn. And she always looked out for you and made sure that everything was okay, checked in with you. She knew that I was living, miles and miles away from home, coming from Massachusetts. So always checking in with you and making sure, that you were going to be successful and applauding you, right? So you definitely need your cheerleaders. And she was definitely one of mine.
So let's talk about that. In somebody you trusted and she looked like you. What was it about her when you think about her now that she exhibited that you now exhibit as you move?
I, grew up in Massachusetts and Connecticut, and I was always one of the only ones, right? I was told I was an exception, and coming to an HBU and seeing for sure with your own eyes, even though you already know it, that you're not an exception, that there is, phenomenal, power in our Black community. It was so comfortable to be in a class and not feel like you have to think about your race. Right. And I think especially coming from, an educational background, being, one of the only ones to being, one of everyone, I just can't even tell you how much confidence that gives you and how much comfort. So for me, it was a phenomenal experience. I highly recommend everyone go to an HBCU because you cannot get that experience anywhere else.
So thinking about that along the same lines, meeting and what's it been like during COVID and other Black doctors that that are friends that you're able to lean into? What has that journey been like for you?
Well, I think we know as Black doctors, right, that we do have a responsibility to make sure that we're advocating for our community. I can't tell you how many times I've passed in a hallway and a family will see me and say, "Are you a doctor here? How can I get in with you?" Because they look like me and they want their kids to see a doctor who looks like me. And also in the reverse, right, that you're having an impact on families and patients who don't look like you, but now have that same expectation, right, that anyone can be a doctor, right? And I think especially during the pandemic, It's so important to have a trusted health professional, whether they look like you or not. You want to have somebody that you trust who's going to look out for you and speak specifically to the issues in your community. And we have to speak up about the fact that COVID is yet another health disparity, and our community needs to be protected in the best way that it can be.
Well, following that train of thought, for all those who are now, they've heard everything, good news, bad news, fake news. They may have had shot 1 and 2, but they're almost saying, I don't want to take the booster. What are they missing? And what would you share with someone who's kind of on the fence or has just decided, I did it twice, I'm not going to do it a third time?
So I would say that part of this is our responsibility as health professionals to do the education piece. So, it's not that one shot or two shots or even the booster may be the end of this, just like we recommend an annual flu vaccine. Every single year, we want you to get your flu vaccine. Same with the hepatitis B series. That's a series of 3 shots, right? And then there are going to be some folks who need more than that. So that does need to be an expectation right from the start. And we're still early. I know folks don't like to hear about that. We're still early in learning about COVID. We have learned a lot. We have, 3 safe vaccines that are, available here in the US. So we certainly have come a long way, but we are at an unprecedented time in this pandemic where we have a variant that is extremely contagious. And there's a huge difference in your outcome, whether you're vaccinated, and right now we mean fully boosted all the way, or you're unvaccinated, right? So there's 17 times more of a chance that you'll end up in the hospital if you're not fully vaccinated. There's 20 times higher risk that you may lose your life to COVID. In addition to that, there's also long haul. And there are not great treatments for that currently. There's a lot of research that's going on, but you certainly don't want to risk having long-term disease or worsening an already, chronic disease that you have, for a virus where you can get vaccinated and prevent it, hopefully in the future, but nothing is 100%. Vaccinating is not 100%, masking is not 100%. All of it combined is really your best chance to prevent the disease in the first place, or if you do end up getting infected, having a mild course of disease.
Many parents have had to make the decision on whether to vaccinate their children 5 and up. If you were talking to a PTA or at a rally for those little people heading to kindergarten and first grade, and they're getting their shots and they're coming to see you, what are you saying to those moms and dads who are leaning in and trusting you?
Well, one, I do think that anybody who's out there who's trying to make this decision, definitely come talk to your pediatrician. We know your child, we know your family, we know your specific risks. And it's understandable. We know that you're going to have questions. We have questions too. We want to make sure that the vaccine is safe, right? And so when you look at how much data we have, there are 16 million children who are aged 12 to 17 who've gotten this Pfizer vaccine. There are another 8 million 5 to 11-year-olds who've gotten it. That's outside of the safety studies. And we know so far kids have done phenomenally well. And in that 5 to 11 group, they actually have only a third of the dose that adults do, and they're responding phenomenally well, very mild side effects, nothing serious that we've seen. And there's no vaccine that we ever stop studying safety on. We're always going to look at safety, and anyone can report it in the safety data. So that's called VAERS, or VAERS. And typically within 6 weeks of giving a vaccine, if there's going to be a serious side effect, we'll know about it. But of course, the bar is much higher for children, as it should be, and we will certainly keep it there. But so far, it has been safe, and so we highly recommend that 5 and up, that you get vaccinated and fully vaccinated.
Research played a huge role. Most people think that the vaccine was rushed, but literally, you've been researching, and Black scientists and physicians have been looking at this issue and this virus. What should we know and why should we trust these vaccines right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. The research that went into developing mRNA vaccines, which for children, that's the Pfizer vaccine that's been approved. And it's based on decades of research. So this isn't something that they, thought of, 2 years ago when this started. This is something that they've been working on. And we are phenomenally excited that the FDA has put, all their emphasis on making sure that these vaccines are safe and really holding these companies to a very high standard to make sure that they're doing the safety studies in a way that's what we call powered to really bring out safety concerns, right? Just like with myocarditis, we went back and the FDA asked them to put more kids in the trials to make sure that we were really looking at that very specifically. So I think fortunately we live in a time where technology is able to do that, and we'll be able to have Pfizer, Moderna, these other companies change based on a variant if they need to, right? They do have that technology. So for me, it's definitely a sigh of relief. Vaccines prevent disease, and they also prevent lifelong complications and what we're really trying to prevent, which is loss of life.
Given that you mentioned loss of life and it's been 2 years basically, did you ever imagine when you were going through your rotation and going preparing to be that full-time doctor in residency that you would face a pandemic?
You learn about them, you read about them, but going through it is very different. It feels very different when you're on the front lines and you're trying to get folks in and trying to stay safe, right? When you're worried about bringing it home to your family, all of those things feel very different when you're in it. But I would definitely say that they train us well. And certainly as physicians, we just keep going. Certainly you have seen folks, burn out, and, some folks who have decided to get out of, the medical field, right? But those are folks that, that's a good decision for themselves, right? But really, the positive piece is that there's so many organizations that are working together, not only here in the United States, but worldwide. We've never seen so many folks come together to really try to end this pandemic. And it's not something that we're going to do tomorrow, but the more that we're getting this education out, the faster we vaccinate, the faster we mask up when there are surges, the better off our community is going to be, and be prepared in case there's something that comes after COVID, right? We never know, but now we know that we can be more prepared for it.
So in saying preparation, as we're getting ready to, we've got winter, going to be spring break for a lot of families that are going to be ready to prepare. What is kind of the medical regimen that you would recommend for a family who's considering, their children going off to spring break, or at least taking a break because they feel like they're just claustrophobic and they're all on top of each other? What should they be doing right now?
Yes, and listen, we understand the pangs of that, right? Getting ready to be back outside, right? Everybody wants to be back out. I think that, you can't go with a cookie cutter recommendation. You really have to tailor it to the family themselves, right? If your child has sickle cell disease, if your child has diabetes, asthma, if your child is obese, right? If they're fully vaccinated, if they're not, if the folks you're going with are fully vaccinated or not, what is the rate, where you're going? There's so many things that are going to go into that decision, right? And I think that there are ways to do it safer, kind of making sure that the community that's around your family is definitely fully vaccinated if they're eligible to be vaccinated, looking at the rates where you're going, looking at how you're going to get there, and making sure too that you're using high quality masks, and getting out of the routine of the cloth. Certainly if cloth is all you have, we will take it. But certainly we know with Omicron, because it's so much more contagious, right, that we need to try to get our community in a real, high quality mask. So looking at all of that combined and making the decision, that's best for your family, and making sure that you're testing, potentially testing in, and of course testing out, and being flexible and realizing that, another surge could come up between now and then. Hopefully this one will be over by the time you get to spring break. But the more we get vaccinated, the more we go back to those preventative measures, that's the faster these surges will come back down.
When you think about that, just controlling your bubble and creating a kind of a COVID protocol for your children, how do you explain that to young people to come in the house, wash their hands, other protocols, touching friends, not touching friends? What says the pediatrician? Because babies like to touch, feel, jump, roll off the couch, and then grab, touch anything, and come in the house and touch everything. What are you saying to those parents who really need a protocol for their children? And
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, we have done this pre-pandemic and always will, right? We talk about kids, whether they're first going off to daycare, right? Or if you got a newborn, especially a preemie in the house, and maybe your kids are in school, right? Maybe that bath is going to be for those kids coming back from daycare right when they come in the door, right? Making sure that you get everything off, right? And when they get cold, right? A cold, keeping them away from the baby. And also talking about even for newborns, right? We want to make sure that the community is vaccinated around that newborn. It's the same thing for COVID, right? So you want to make sure that, especially for the kids who are under 5 and unvaccinated, you do have to take an extra step. And I always tell my family, say, Dr. Brown said, right? You can use me as your excuse, right? If you have somebody and you don't want to offend them, they're not quite understanding what you're doing to protect your family, because statistics don't mean a lot to a family who's standing by the bedside of a child in the hospital, and certainly not in the ICU. So, you really want to make sure that you're putting your family's, safety, first.
so you've managed to make it through COVID, and you're really trying to educate our community on health, but you're out on the front line. What do you tell yourself every day to really meet COVID and just manage through, because you've given so much?
I'm definitely one who gets up and likes to do a little meditation and get my mind right before I get my day started. I think that is even more important in COVID, and really getting ready, because there's not a day that you don't see a patient that potentially has COVID. And really, in practice, you have to assume everyone has it, because so much of COVID has no symptoms at all. So when I'm seeing a well family, I am in pretty much full PPE and N95 and a face shield for every single visit. And so you have to be really careful when you're putting that on, when you're taking that off. And certainly I also have a good family that supports me every morning before I arrive at work. My mom sends me a text to tell me, be safe. I'm sending you positive, energy and safety. And all of those things, I think, help keep you, doing your job, because this is something that I love. And certainly the pandemic is not going to take that out.
I love that. Lastly, I loved how you said it. So maybe we should assume everybody has it. What is that really saying that we all may be getting too comfortable about right now? Why should we assume that everyone has it?
I think it's one of these myths, even in pediatric realm, a lot of folks still today believe that kids can't get it or they can't spread it. We know none of that is true. Most of COVID, especially in children, has no symptoms at all. And then after you get an exposure, it can take up to 14 days before you exhibit symptoms, right? And then this variant is extremely contagious, right? Which is why they're saying now that the cloth mask is no longer enough. It doesn't block enough particles. And certainly then if your mask is underneath your nose or underneath your chin, it's not helping either side of the mask, right? So you definitely want to make sure that you're paying attention, whether it's in an elevator, even when you're outside eating somewhere, if it's very crowded. This is a virus that can spread if you're that close to folks, even if you're outside, if everybody's unmasked and, eating. So you have to be very careful and realize that you don't want to take those chances. So really, I know folks have a lot of COVID fatigue, but please try to hang in there with us, because it's going to mean a big difference, right? And even though you may not get sick from COVID, right? Maybe 2 doors down, someone doesn't survive it. and maybe they got it from you in the elevator, and you'll never know, right? So just don't take that chance. Protect yourself, your family, and your community.
I know you're going out. You're going to be out there on the front line again. Where can the community meet you and your whole team in Atlanta coming up soon?
So we are going to be out on Saturday, February 5th, starting at 11, going all the way to 3. And we're going to be at the parking lot at the C.T. Martin Natatorium and Recreation Center. So here in Atlanta, please come out and see us. Come get vaccinated. Come ask your questions. And we can't wait to see you.
So the world's best pediatrician is right here, been on Health IQ. Dr. Brown, thank you so much. HBCU graduate, Xavier, and then of course, HU, Harvard University Medical School. We really appreciate the reflection that you give of ourselves and of the genius and the intellectual capacity, but nothing else more than the empathy and love that you give to our families and children each and every day on the front line. I'm Munson Steed, and this is Health IQ.